Welcome back to the Breaking Bias podcast. I am your co-host, Molly, and I am joined by my incredible co-host, as always, Dr. Obbs. How are you, Obbs? We are just off of, was it a double, a triple header? I don't really even know anymore.
I've
but
lost
we are just
count.
Off of, we are just off of the race at the in Jeddah at the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix, and I think we definitely need to do a little bit of recap. But what's up? How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm in the middle of what I call apex analysis fatigue, which we will get into because there was a lot of things that have been discussed after the race in Jeddah. But it was a good race. To be honest, I missed most of free practice because it was Easter weekend and it was just a busy weekend for the family.
I think I was texting you like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah,
you're like, "Wait, I'm not
I'm
watching."
like, "What's happening?"
Yeah, I'm like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize."
I did catch, I did catch quali though, which quali was fantastic, and then I missed the race, but I watched the race back, so I'm up to speed on all the things that happened. But how was your weekend, Molly? Were you just exclusively watching Formula One? Was there other things you were watching?
Yeah, so I had surgery a week ago, last Monday, so I still was kind of on my recoup. I wasn't really sure how I was going to feel, so I kind of just planned a weekend of like, we're going to chill and not do anything. I did go out and see some friends Saturday night because I was feeling good, but it was very like, okay, let's watch Formula One. And then it was an off week for everybody but Xfinity and Trucks. Xfinity and Trucks raced at Rockingham, so I kept an eye on that as well, along with Formula One. And then it was the 6 hours of Imola for WEC, which I also thoroughly enjoyed and got to check that out as well. So kept an eye on those. But I feel like aside from the DQ and Xfinity, there wasn't much else going on, really.
No.
It was very much like the excitement was in Formula One, and then the Xfinity winner got disqualified, but they are appealing it tomorrow due to a technical violation around the suspension arm and truck arm. So I'm actually really intrigued and looking into that. But I think we're kind of impromptu doing this episode, so I'm kind of excited to see where this takes us, because usually we are ever the engineers and quite prepared with our at least show notes and talking points. But I'm super excited to hear what maybe stuck out to you as well, watching the race, watching practice, because I know with some of the upgrades that got brought, stewarding, there's kind of actually a lot to talk about here.
There is a lot to talk about. And yes, for our listeners, we are raw dogging this one. This is no show production notes. I feel like we've done this like once or twice before, Molly, and they were one of our best episodes.
Maybe we need to do that more often.
Yeah, we just need to make this standard. Right. So
no thoughts, head empty, just vibes in Formula One.
Yeah, pure vibes, because we're like so opposite to pure vibes on X, on like all of our other social media platforms. We're always like talking about data and everything else that's going on, but like we're going to be pure vibes today.
And like as like in the box I am as an engineer, when people meet me, I'm very like, I'm straight, like I'm a lot more laid back, like more vibes than like I have my ducks in a row. So I feel that. Well, let's get into it. Sorry.
I mean, we I guess we had a big, update that happened this race. I think Ferrari brought a new floor, right?
They did.
I think
that was kind of the big thing, was there was a new Ferrari floor.
Yeah. So meant to help them, because some of the things that we've been talking about previously, Molly, is just the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde performance of the Ferrari, the whole China sprint race win, and then, not great performance during the race qualification. And then in the race, it ultimately led to the DQ, in which case we were saying, hey, we felt like, had to do something with potentially the car needing to be run too low. One of the things that obviously we can't see a lot of the things that are in a floor update because they're just not visible or detectable to the eye. But we did get a great picture from Xavi Gasquez, who showed through the diffuser. Yes, through the diffuser, there's a little bump right where the boat is, the very back of the floor, and the transition to the diffuser right along the center line. There's a little bump down there. And I posted something about this, and I thought, well, this is something that maybe Ferrari has put together to increase the amount of rotation in the centerline flow of the diffuser that's kind of aiding mixing with the two other large structures within the diffuser, which are the vortex pairs that are housed inside the diffuser body itself, the main central part of the diffuser body. But It could also be something potentially to help them to find more performance in a window, a rear ride height window that is maybe not as close to the ground, a little bit elevated, right? So they maybe don't have to run the car as low. What do you think? What did you see from Ferrari's performance? Did the floor work? What are the thoughts here?
I definitely think it was a step in the right direction. You saw Lewis hanging with, was it Lando for a bit? They were fighting. I
Yeah.
still think that it maybe didn't close the gap as much as they thought it may have. And that might have just still been a byproduct of the wake and outwash causing a lot of passing issues versus maybe
Mm-hmm.
actually closing the gap. So I
Yeah.
almost personally want another data point on this floor before I say I think it worked or not. But I do think it was closing the gap somewhat for Ferrari. Maybe not as much as everybody expected a new floor would, but I do think that it showed that they can now hang a little bit better,
Mm-hmm.
and their tire life maybe has also improved as well, because we didn't see as much of
Ah.
what I thought was high deg on
Mm-hmm.
this kind of package, especially running the three softest compounds. I would have expected personally, kind of what we were talking about last episode, maybe Ferrari actually struggling a bit
Mm-hmm.
with that, especially knowing how soft the tires were going to be. And it really almost seemed like Mercedes struggled a bit more because George had that tire coming apart at the end.
Yeah, George's tire was blistering. As he said, my tires are toast.
Yeah,
You're exactly
I was
right.
expecting cords.
Yeah,
Go
but
ahead, sorry.
you're spot on, by the way, with the whole assessment of Ferrari's increase in tire performance. I think Charles was maybe one of the fastest guys on the track there on that last
Yes.
stint, towards the tail end of the stint on lighter
Yeah, he
fuel.
put in like a really solid, kind of quietly played out very well race that put him on the
Yeah,
podium. They called that
yeah.
well, and the not high deck I think helped. Sorry, go ahead.
No, but you're right. Absolutely. I mean, and that's a good sign, because
Yeah.
I think for Ferrari has historically, at least, I mean, look, Jeddah is a front limited track. I think Red Bull's always going to be, stronger this year on the front limited tracks unless the Imola package has changed something.
Yeah.
McLaren seems to be the best at rear limited tracks, but now has shown that they can be obviously very strong as well
Yeah.
in the front limited tracks. And here's Ferrari showing that they also can be strong in a front
Mm-hmm.
limited track and find
Yeah.
performance and improve their tire degradation. So I think that's a
Yeah.
good sign for the
And
Tifosi.
they looked pretty good in the low speeds as well, because we were talking about how Jeddah's got a little bit higher of a low speed component, and how we were
Mm-hmm.
concerned with some of the team's performance based on what we'd seen in some of the other low to mid speeds in the first few races. And I think they demonstrated that they might be kind of balancing out a little bit more too, that they might have a better low speed performance available to them with this floor as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jeddah's one of those tracks that's kind of funny because there's a lot of high speed sections. It rewards,
Mm-hmm.
especially in sector 2, late sector 2, a lot of good performance and kind of these switchbacks and these quick flowing rhythmic high speed sections that are loads of fun to drive on the racing simulator, by the way. But it also demands like great low speed
Mm-hmm.
exit performance, which I think
Yeah.
Ferrari's always been very good at, but
Mm-hmm.
has struggled with rear tire deg as a
Yes.
result of that as well. So it seems like they maybe have remedied those issues.
Yeah. And I mean, even when you think about it from when your rears are not acting like they should, is it how they were setting it up or where they had to set up with the previous floor, steer angle, camber, the suspension itself, that changed the contact path to the tire that was leading to more wear as well. And obviously ride height being a key factor as well to generate downforce. But if they're now more efficiently working around the rear of that car with this new floor, if based on the pictures of the diffuser we saw, I think that is absolutely likely why they probably had better wear in Jeddah.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that's Ferrari. I think we saw, I guess for Red Bull, they had some reported updates. There was like an
Mm-hmm.
increased cooling outlet
Yes.
on the engine cover, and then there was a track specific modified beam wing because,
Mm-hmm.
and something we've talked about before, Molly, is that Jeddah being sort of like first level insight into what you could potentially get later
Yes.
in Monza, for instance, although maybe it's not Monza level low speed wings or low drag wings and things like that. But teams are definitely trying to find that balance because it is high speed. You do need some low speed mechanical performance. But something that was discussed, rumors that were going around, I can't confirm or deny, is that they had some mechanical updates to the car, which you don't have to publish in the update table. And there was
what we can
some
see.
Exactly. Only the things you can see. So that's just a reminder to our listeners that what you see in the table is not always reflective of all the things that are changing. And so there was some discussions around some mechanical updates to the Red Bull package to help it to be a little bit less of a diva, have a bit higher of an operating window. I think some people were saying that within the side pod, how they orient and kind of package some of the cooling elements and things like that, they were changing that mechanical packaging, and so the weight distribution is a little bit different. So maybe some things happening there on the Red Bull. I think they looked again on Friday a little lost to an extent, found their way to a better setup on Saturday. Obviously, Max puts it on pole in another just amazing lap. And I know people are gonna be in the mentions talking about this is Red Bull's MO. They just sandbag in free practice. I love that face, Molly. They just sandbag in free practice, and and just to make Max look good. And it's like, no, okay, look.
No.
It's a front limited track. So yes, okay. They're right at that point where they're the first or second fastest car on front limited tracks. It does not change the fact that they're probably fourth fastest team on rear limited tracks because it's a donkey on those tracks right now, at least. But it still took everything out of Max to put it on pole. Like, he was pushing. I compared his quali lap progression as well throughout the qualifying. You could see him just getting faster and faster. He's pushing the limits in each one of the corners. And even he himself was talking about the adrenaline he still had, after that lap, because he thought it was like he just was on the edge. He didn't know if he was going to hit the wall a couple times.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that. And if you watch the onboard from that lap, I don't think I took a breath, because I usually will watch his onboard, especially for like his last push laps, because that's usually where like he's gonna bang one out pretty cool. And I don't think I took a breath. I was like, he's gonna wall it, or this car is just out of his hands. Like, his car control on that lap is insane. And where a lot of people, where I have a problem, like, oh, they're sandbagging, we kind of know at this point there are correlation problems happening, and there's something going on that's not translating to what they expect on track versus what they were modeling to some degree. Could that be improved? Yes, but there's still a lot of work that's going on to find the right setup to use the toolbox that the performance engineer and the race engineer have available to them, hand in hand with what's being done in the simulator back at the factory, to bring that car on track. This isn't sandbagging. This is kind of how racing works. We see it a lot. Like, I come from the NASCAR paddock. We see it a lot in the Cup Series paddock, that like Adam Stern with Kyle Busch for a really long time, they would be absolutely nowhere. And then they'd have their little practice session, kind of make some tweaks based on that 15-minute session, and Kyle would come out, bang it on pole, and they would adjust it. Or even over the course of a race, same thing. They're nowhere in qualifying, and then over the course of the race, he's able to dial in that car, use their data, use their tools, use what they have available to them, and that car wins the race. This is very normal in motorsport. When there is sandbagging, it's typically around BOP, because that is like a locked in thing. This is one of those, it's very normal in motorsports to have a progression over the weekend. The goal is always you unpack and you are correlated and you are right where you expect to be, obviously in a race weekend. But this really shows the work that's going on back at the sim, back at the factory, the work that the team is doing at the track, the work that GP, his performance engineer, and the tools that they have available to them to set up and adjust this car to make it fast. It's not just sandbagging. We know that the teams turn their engines up for qualifying. We know that they run in higher modes. That is a given, but this really lends itself to all of the pieces that go into finding the speed in the car over the course of the weekend, because we've seen it where Red Bull unpacks and they're fast, and that's great, and then they get faster. That's exactly what this is happening, but the car not necessarily is the best when it comes out of the freight and off the truck, essentially.
Yeah, spot on, Molly. you know, not to give any airtime to the trolls, but it's like there's just a lot of that discussion, and it makes me irritated, because I just think, like, you know, Max really does show that he's a very special talent when it comes to that kind of stuff. I think,
Yeah.
you know, Oscar Piastri is absolutely showing that he is a special talent, and that he deserves, you know, accolades, and he deserves to have attention and focus. Not that he demands it, he's not that kind of driver.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think Max, you know, doing what Max does, was it 2021 where he had the lap, right? And then it was like he hit the wall on the
Yes.
last corner. I
It
think it was
was,
maybe,
yeah.
yeah. So it was
It was
like,
21.
I had those same vibes. I had that same
Yes.
feeling going through when I was
Mm-hmm.
seeing those, you know, those sectors pop up like that. And then he was getting to that final corner. And I, like you, Molly, you remember we texted each other, and I was like,
Yeah.
I realized that I hadn't breathed like almost that whole lap. Like I was just
Yeah.
holding my breath
Oh
for
my
that
God.
final corner. And then when he got across, my in-laws were in at the house. When he got over the line, I was like,
Yeah.
you know, it was like cheering.
Yeah.
And my father-in-law was like, what are you doing? But it's like, you know, it was just, yeah, it was a really special lap. Um,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in the race, you know, it was one of those situations, and we'll come to all the things that happened after lap one.
Yeah.
But um, I think the Red Bull car showed good performance, you know,
Yeah.
degradation performance, which is a good sign for the
Yes.
car. I think
It was,
it showed. Yeah, go ahead.
I was to say it was putting a gap between him
Yeah.
and the others in clean air, which was also good. There was, I
Mhm.
think you can see how quick the McLaren is,
Yeah.
but the fact that Max was still able to generate a gap before pit cycle and everything like that, was able to pull away, I think says the car has some speed to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's you know, there's some things certainly to be said about Jeddah in general, and the value of clean air.
Mm-hmm.
Probably these things are going to be more or less important dependent on the track. I have a theory, you know, around this. I mean, Baku, same sort of a thing. These tracks, which are street tracks that are walled tracks, my theory is that the, you know, clean air is absolutely like powerful, because of the
Clean
fact
air
that
is
when you
king.
have a wake, um, it is literally, a wake is, as we've talked about before, you know, a car moving through air and disturbing the air and leaving a resonance, not a resonance, but like it leaves a footprint
A
in the air
disturbance.
around it, a disturbance. Yeah. And this disturbance is low energy disturbance. And so what needs to happen is now, you know, air needs to kind of dissipate and fill that wake to sort of, you know, to get it to sort of go away, right? And when
Mm-hmm.
you have walled tracks like these city tracks, you don't necessarily have that same amount of dissipation of the wake. That's my theory. It makes the toe incredibly strong. We saw how important the toe was as well here. Yuki gave Max a great toe. Shout out
Mm-hmm.
Yuki
He did.
on
Yeah.
Max's quali lap,
Shout
which,
out Yuki in the car so far in general. I think he's
yeah,
performing really well.
yeah. Shout out Yuki. He had a great qualifying, I think, really showed out. Unfortunate what happened in the race there, to where he, you know, him and Pierre, right? It was Pierre, I think,
Yeah.
couldn't
Yep.
continue. That was just a
Purely,
two
purely
into
racing
one
incident.
situation that just doesn't,
Yeah.
yeah, doesn't work,
Yeah. And hearing
unfortunately.
Pierre talk about it, he knew Yuki was there. He gave Yuki the room. He was like, I know how you come off that corner. I know how to take it on the outside. He gave him as much room as I could. And it was purely a racing incident. It's one of those that
Yeah.
I eternally campaign for spotters in Formula One. Easily avoidable lap one incident had you had a spotter.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yep.
But like, it
Yep.
was one of those things that was purely a racing incident, and it happened, and it was very unfortunate. Do we want to, speaking of racing incidents, talk about turn one with Oscar and
Yeah,
Max?
I've already got enough gray
I
hair
have
in
some
my beard.
feelings. Yeah.
let's let's start with your feelings, Molly. Yeah, what how did you feel from
I
it? Yeah.
I don't think it was justified given precedent on similar rulings, personally,
Mm,
and looking at the telemetry. I think it went against, I think it was Mexico last year when we had a similar ruling. I think it directly contradicted the Mexico precedent. And when you looked at the
yep.
telemetry, Max broke first and then Oscar
Mm,
broke later, obviously trying
mm,
to get that gap and get the corner on Max so that if the overlap did happen, he would have the place essentially under regulations, as I understand it, with some of the examples that they give. Oscar was trying to get the corner and have that lead edge based on the regulations to show what happens in side by side, right?
Yeah. And you know, they both, looking at the telemetry, they both carried a lot of speed into the corner. So it's definitely not, you know, one versus the other. I think they were both culpable.
Yes.
I certainly think, yes, you know, Oscar Piastri braked later than Max. Max, when you look at his line, but you know, Jeddah is one of those tracks which is funny because normally P1 has the inside line into turn one usually.
Yes.
So they've got the position, but Jeddah's not that way. And so Max was on the outside. You know, he didn't swoop over to defend the inside because Oscar Piastri had a great jump. So all credit to Piastri's start for sure.
Typically, too, for listeners, if they want to come for this, we have telemetry receipts. The driver on the inside is always going to brake later at Jeddah. It's just the way that's corner apexing, right? That line is going to allow you to carry more speed and brake later. So Oscar's telemetry shows, because he was on the inside line, and you could look at the telemetry and probably actually tell that he was on the inside without knowing that he was on the inside based on his brake path. Yeah.
And so then, you know, we're not talking enough again about how big these cars are and how difficult it is to get through turn ones side by side on most tracks, and especially on this track. Now, you mentioned Mexico 2024, which is a great shout out because of the fact that Max actually got penalized in Mexico because he was the inside guy. And you know, and he ran, that was Lando, right? He ran Lando so, outside too far. And he actually got penalized for the sporting regulation. He got penalized for the international regulation that is about passing, which is Appendix L, Chapter 4, Section 2, where it states that you cannot overcrowd a car essentially and push them off the track. And this is the exact one that he got rung up on. And somehow Piastri wasn't also found to be, you know, at fault for pretty much pushing Max off the track.
Yeah, well. Exactly. Yeah, I feel like it was the flip situation because Max was pushed off while he was ahead. If you look at the overhead shots, personally, I feel, and coupled with his steering trace didn't really change. He was not and a lot of people are debating whether Max was ever going to make that corner with Oscar on the inside. And I don't think that that's important, right? He was en route to make the corner if Oscar wasn't there. But then the way Oscar took his line, I think it was the flip of Mexico personally. And my big thing is this. I think that this ruling directly contradicted precedent, and all that's my big thing. And everybody's trying to make it well, Oscar did this, Max did that, and it's this. And my thing is it's consistency. And I think that's where I'm really frustrated with the situation because it wasn't consistent. I would have actually anticipated the penalty to be on Oscar. I almost said Lando, Jesus. On Oscar rather than Max, because Max really didn't gain an advantage there. That hurt Max, in my opinion. And then Oscar did the essentially Mexico move, right? That's where I'm at. And that's all I want is consistency in your rulings. And now I'm a little nervous of what door does this open, especially with the fact that typically lap one incidents with the stewards are kind of, you know what? Lap one, it happens. It's a racing incident, right? Because then later on in the race, didn't they slap Liam with a 10-second leaving the track and gaining an advantage penalty for a completely different thing? Where's the consistency there, right?
It's so shocking. That one is like so baffling to me. I don't understand it.
Baffling. I think as equally as the turn one to me, given that we have precedent on this turn one incident, this type of overlap with turn one.
Well, and the thing is, like, you know, there's people that are saying, you know, Max should have given up the place. He should have backed up to Piastri or closed the gap so then he wasn't perceived to have gained an advantage. But what happened? It was like 2 corners later or 3 corners later, and Yuki and Pierre came together And then there was
Yeah.
a safety car. So it's like
Yeah.
there was no chance
Never.
for Red Bull to like properly look at this and assess it. And then after the safety car came out, then everybody backed up again. So
Yeah.
any lasting advantage he maybe did have was gone because the safety car
Yeah.
came. So there was no opportunity for Red Bull to look at this and go, okay, Max, just kind of get Piastri closer or something won't get gaining an advantage penalty. But your whole point on the line is a good one, because Piastri's line, when you look at a freeze frame, when Piastri is on the apex, his trajectory is different than Max's trajectory. You know how you can tell? Because when you look at the gap between the two cars, between the front wheels and the rear wheels, it's like a triangle. That's how you know that cars are on different trajectories, because the front wheel is closer than the rear wheels. And yes, granted, it's a corner. Get it. We understand geometry and all these radiuses of curvature and things like this. But when you're taking a radius and you're that close to one another, you are on the same arc. Okay. Granted, the guy on the inside is on a bit of a tighter radius than the guy on the outside. But at the end of the day, at any equidistant point, you should theoretically have the front and the rear tires, relatively speaking, the same distance from one another. But this was like a wedge. And so Piastri's line is taking him out. Max, I do believe, would have made that corner because his trajectory was showing that it was that he was going to make that corner. But the problem is that like he couldn't turn, even if he wanted to, he couldn't turn more because Oscar was right there. So it's like, what do you expect him to do other than he has to bail out?
Yeah, and that's in the car. You have to make those split-second decisions, and I don't want to wreck out of the race on the first lap when I have a fast car. So in that moment, I'm going to avoid contact, right? Because I can't make my line. He made a split-second decision, and like I said, I personally don't feel it gave him an advantage.
Yeah. And people have asked the question, like, why didn't Red Bull appeal? Because they had the right to review. They chose not to. The whole grounds for appeal, right to review, is that there's new and substantial evidence that you could present that could sway the decision in your decision in your direction. I don't think in this case there's probably that new and substantial evidence. I think the same telemetry, the same data that they're looking at now is the same telemetry and data that was accessible to the stewards when they made the decision. So they couldn't necessarily come with anything new. That's why they did it. It's not, or that's why they chose not to do the appeal. It's not that they're admitting that Max is wrong. It's that like the terms of the appeal are that you have to have XYZ in order for it not to immediately been thrown out. They probably didn't feel like they had the XYZ. It doesn't change the fact that they still believe it was the wrong decision at the end of the day.
Yes.
So
I agree.
Yeah. But
it was kind of a weekend of baffling stewarding, I felt like. And it really took away from what was kind of a really interesting strategy call. The undercut was really powerful, and seeing how that played out, and some of the guys being able to push a little bit longer than I think we had anticipated, starting on mediums versus the long run with like Lando out of position starting on hards. And then you just had this another baffling stewarding error that I think took away from actually a kind of interesting strategy race.
Yeah. I mean, Charles went super long on his mediums. Which ended up being a really good call. From a strategic standpoint, he had the tire offset. I think it also kind of it sort of supports some of the things that everybody is saying, which is that if you're in these low deg tracks where you aren't able to differentiate teams based off of degradation performance, then it can become a little processional. I think you do have to take these big strategic calls like Ferrari did with Charles to just go long. And, and I heard as well, by the way, that it was one of the things that enabled Lando to make the switch when he did off of the hards onto the mediums, because he saw how far Charles was able to go on the mediums.
Yeah.
So Lando was then confident. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually almost felt they kept Max a lap too long out as well, even though he had the penalty, and they were telling him push to build the gap so that it was a less of an impactful penalty. But I thought that they should have maybe gone and not kind of protected better against getting undercut, because I think that ultimately might have been a bit of a demise there, why he wasn't, or when he came out of the pits, he was as far back as he was. And I mean, that was kind of a slow stop. It was 3-3 without the penalty, 5-second
That's what I
penalty.
was going to ask is, was it slow?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was, I think it was 8.3 seconds total in pit. 5 seconds of that obviously is your penalty call. So it was a 3.3 second stop total, which for like Red Bull, but what we're used to from them, I think that is a little bit slower of a stop, right?
Yeah. Callum said on his Instagram, I was just friend of the pod, Callum. I was just listening to one of his Instagrams. He made a little reel about everybody's mentioning to me about the Red Bull pit stops, and in that he said, I used to always feel like anything under, I think he said 4 seconds, anything under 4 seconds is pretty okay. But obviously not to Red Bull standards, but like not catastrophic. And but yeah, I mean that one being 3.3, I think it kind of maybe comes to, and I can't remember, and maybe you can help me remember, but I feel like Callum had told us something about how there's a difference in pit stops when you've got a car coming in versus when you're serving a penalty and you're doing everything from a stationary standpoint.
Yes.
Because when a car is coming in, he can time it and kind of hit the nut before, I think before the car stops or something.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then all this kind of, now when it's stopped, it's like it's all kind of compounding. It's actually a bit slower than when the car is coming in.
Correct. Yeah. So I think that also maybe like as well as they're trained and as well as muscle memory is, and as many times as they have practiced this, right? There is still a difference from a static to a dynamic stop like that when you're stopped and you're waiting versus hitting the nut before the car is even fully stopped, like you're saying, and Callum explained. And didn't they had some sort of release issues the weekend before with their lollipop system as well, which was really interesting. I don't even know if we want to dive into that either, but that
it was a
caught my eye
wiring
as well.
issue on the gantry. They said, or something. It was,
it was like a little electrical issue, which
maybe tell everybody what the gantry is in the pits.
So the gantry in the pits, and this is what I know it as, is that big overhead piece that comes out over each of the pit stalls that the air hoses come down from for the guns, and then also the light system comes down that way as well with the lollipop system, and the guy holding the button to release it, the essentially digital lollipop guy, or the stop spotter is what a lot of teams will actually call that member, is when the stop's ready, they'll release the light. They're spotting the stop for driver release. Sometimes that's all linked together, I think, as well. It's all kind of tied together when they can release and everything, but it's that big overhead piece that overhangs the pit is the gantry. Cameras and everything are there as well. And there was a wiring issue in it that meant that it wasn't changing when it should have. Either the button was released, or however they have things linked together to say you can drop and let the car go. It was actually not responding as it should.
Yeah. So the guys on the pit, on the guns on each of the corners, after they're done, they have to hit the button. They have to hit a button or something to say they're done. And then is the jackman involved in this as well? Is there some sort? No,
I don't know. I would have to go dig around again. I don't think the jack is controlled that way. I think the jack is still based on the lights. They're looking for the light. There's not like in IMSA with the air jack where it drops based on what's happened around it. NASCAR's obviously floor jack, but I actually am not sure if the jack is linked or not. I do know that the guns tie into the light, being able to change though.
So it's all the guns then, and then that then is driven, is basically the go, no go for the light change for the driver to be able to drive off.
Yep.
So that's the issue. That was unfortunate. I mean, shout out honestly though to Ferrari for a 2-second pit stop in Jeddah, which is really good.
Let's go.
One of the teams, I think maybe last year was it, or the year before, that was struggling a bit, but now is just stringing together great pit stops this year. So big props to their team.
Really on it. Yeah, they're on it. I mean, McLaren's always on it. The top teams, I think, are pretty close in kind of being on it. I think Red Bull's got some kinks that they're working on still in the pits. Like, they're still fast. It's just,
Yeah.
it seems like they're having some inconsistency and some growing pains. Maybe, I hate to say it, in the absence of Callum, when you've been a crew like that for so long, they obviously will have someone new on that corner in Callum's place. So it's maybe a little bit of growing pains in how they're doing the stop and who's doing what, and working with each other still, right?
Mm-hmm. Is Callum the only one that's changed on that on the pit team?
I
Or
believe
was there a
so.
different
Yeah.
change? Okay.
I don't think so, because the Collar twins were out for a little bit, but they had
Mhm.
backup crew covering for them, which the backup crew would have already have been training with the main crew, so that shouldn't have been as big of a deal. But I believe Callum's position is the only one that's changed, because both car holders are still the same. I think both jackmen are still the same. I think Michaela's still on the front corner. She's one of the front wheel carriers. The other wheel gunners are the same. So I think Callum's position might actually be the only one that's changed on that car.
Okay.
I'll have to look.
Well,
There's a really handy Red Bull Instagram account that posts about the crew all the time, and they have like who's on what car. Let's go look.
That's good. Yeah, while you're looking that up, Molly, it's I think from Red Bull side, obviously P2 maybe not what you wanted, but Oscar Piastri, great race. Great qualifying. It was his pass on, was that Charles? Did he made the pass around the outside and it was on, God, I can't remember which turn it was.
I couldn't tell you which turn for the life of me, but
yes. I think it was in sector 2, but that was fantastic. Peak Piastri, like, just major cojones taking the pass high speed around the outside. Dude is obviously an incredibly talented driver, very skilled. I think McLaren had some updates, right, for this race, I believe. Maybe they brought some updates. Yeah, new diffuser. New diffuser. McLaren brought a new diffuser. That's right. So not sure if there was a new floor with that. I think maybe it was just the diffuser. There was some confusion on whether or not it was.
Yeah. I don't think it was a new floor. I feel like we would have probably texted had it been a new floor.
Yeah, so McLaren's got this really interesting, though, in the boat of their diffuser right along the center line, this like sort of double hump kind of geometry, which is really interesting. I mean, and when I see those kinds of things, one of the things I always think of is that, the pressure, how you're building pressure to support other regions within the diffuser. There's all this channeling and profiling that's in the diffuser. Are you just looking maybe to build pressure in one region to kind of support another region? Maybe you might take a loss in one spot to find gains in another spot. Maybe this is something that they are doing with their design. I have also found and heard actually from people that some changes and things that you'll make, in the diffuser, though you might take like a local load loss in the diffuser, can have a substantial impact, maybe positively upstream, potentially on the floor, in an area of the floor that you might be having some problems with. Now, generally speaking, better diffuser performance means better floor performance, yes, but maybe how you kind of locate certain structures or how the pressure is sort of distributed throughout the system, you might be able to take a loss in one small area to find gains in another area.
Exactly.
I think McLaren's obviously doing an excellent job with their car development. Red Bull's got a big package coming up in Imola. Some rumors around Miami, potentially with the RB21, maybe getting some mechanical updates. I've heard like some rear suspension tweaks and things like that, potentially for Miami. So let's see what happens. I mean, again, those are not going to be reported on the update table because they're not going to be things that are visible to the eye. So unfortunately, we won't know for sure.
No, Instagram's giving me grief. I can't find what I'm looking for of who took Callum's gunner position on the front turn it. I will.
That's okay. We can find that out.
I'll ask if. Oh yeah, that's. Yeah.
We
will find out. But yeah, that's. I would actually probably almost guarantee it probably was promotion off the backup crew.
Yeah.
So it's a known entity for the most part.
Yeah. So let's see. We've talked about. We haven't talked about Mercedes yet. So Mercedes from Jeddah. Yes. I think Mercedes was from like day one on it.
They were, I think, what we expected to be on it and
Yeah.
have the pace based on what we talked about and estimated and kind of looked at with car performance. And I was like, yeah, actually, you know what? That was a good call. We nailed
Yeah.
that one.
But
So
surprisingly, had issues with blistering on
Yes.
was it the front left or one of the front tires, I
front
think, for
left.
George?
It was
Yeah.
front left for George. I fully expected a cord. The way I was like, oh, I like turned his onboard on right away and was like, is he cording? But it was starting to blister and go. He'd maybe pushed it a little too far in its run. And then with it set up, because that was on his hard, or was that his medium that he blistered?
I think it was his medium, I think.
Oh,
No.
yeah, you're right.
He blistered both. I think he might have
don't know.
blistered both, actually. They might have had issues with both, because I think I read somewhere that they were saying that they pushed too hard too early on the stint.
Yeah,
on the tire.
I did see that. I couldn't remember
on both
which
tires.
stint, but
yeah. Well, there's going to be, Mercedes always does these excellent kind of like post-race debriefs that they post on YouTube. And so it's Tuesday. Wait, no, it's Wednesday.
It is Tuesday.
Oh, Lord,
it is Wednesday. Holy shit.
It's Wednesday. I've lost a whole day of my life.
Okay, it's fine.
And
so did I yesterday.
And they've probably dropped the video.
Yeah, we'll
maybe
have to
I just haven't seen it yet. So yeah, we'll have to go look at that. But definitely, go ahead.
That would suggest, and I don't think they ever. And that's where I'm curious what they changed, because I don't know if they ever saw that coming off of their long runs and some of their simulated runs. I mean,
no,
the day sessions for practice aren't really a good one-to-one of what the race environment is. Which, they're not good representative. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. It's not the most representative, but even then, those conditions would have likely been more extreme.
Yeah,
and they weren't seeing that in those practices, at least from the feedback I was hearing from drivers on onboards and on the runs that we do hear. I wish we could hear the when they're back in the garage feedback. And unless you're there, you don't get to hear that. But from at least what we saw and could kind of surmise, it didn't seem like wear, even when they were doing some push and some simulation in arguably more extreme conditions, was a concern. And so what did they change for the race, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think they're probably left scratching their heads a little bit. They've pushed to change the car to such a way to where they no longer only have good performance in cold weather. I think they've proven that they can be fast in warm weather as well. The only question is, has the pendulum swung too far? Is there something that they're doing to prep the tires, or something they're doing to energize the tires so that they don't only have this cold temp performance that now has maybe made it swing the pendulum a little bit too far? I'm not sure. And I doubt they'll ever tell us for sure, but it might be something to watch. And speaking of things to watch in the future, should we talk about what to expect from Miami as our next race?
I think so, yeah, because that's our next race.
That's our next race. So
pay me, Ami.
Yeah. So we're not going to talk about influencers who are maybe or maybe not invited to Miami, but we're going to talk about, Miami, the track. What last year was where McLaren rolled out their first update and found mega pace.
Yes.
I don't expect that they're going to be slow by any means in Miami. I think it's going to entirely translate. They're definitely going to be one of the favorites. I think, again, Mercedes, very good, seems to be around all different kinds of tracks. What's the weather going to be like? It has been relatively hot maybe a stray shower that could kind of throw a loop for the teams there.
And
what's
there's a
Ferrari
new pit
gonna
entry this year.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Really?
Sorry, there is a new track. Okay. There's a new pit entry this year. And it's a sprint weekend.
It's a sprint weekend, yes. So that is just a major joker.
No, is it not a sprint weekend? No, they changed.
It is.
I think I'm thinking last year. They changed the pit entry last year. I think I'm thinking Miami last year. Pit entry was different. Okay. Is it a sprint again this year?
It is a sprint this year. It is a sprint.
Okay.
I looked at it. It's a sprint weekend.
Pit entry was new last year. I'm sorry.
Well, because I know when I look at and I see the sprints and I just think automatically like Red Bull's going to be in the mud because, they just can't directly out of the box. And it was actually one of the things that I think maybe Vasseur, was it Vasseur? Who was it? It might have been Fred Vasseur.
Fred has been on it lately.
Fred's been a demon lately. Yeah.
I love it, man.
I think he maybe said something about how Miami's not a good place to bring updates because it
No.
was a sprint weekend, which is why
Yes.
then they were planning, I think, the next package for Imola,
That's
I
why a
believe.
lot
So
of
that
people
was,
were looking at Imola.
yeah. So I think that was part of his
So,
justification. So I definitely see McLaren being very strong here.
yeah.
The all the different elements we just highlighted, track temps, wind's usually not a problem in Miami, but stray shower here and there could be certainly. The Mickey Mouse corner is always going to be potentially a problem for someone who can't get
Yeah.
that little setup, right. So could be an interesting weekend.
Yeah, I think it'll probably wind up being relatively interesting. I feel like Miami usually winds up being shockingly interesting, which is
Yeah.
kind of a surprise. So I think I'm excited. How do you feel like the fact that Oscar has overtaken Lando in the Drivers' Championship may play into what we see in Miami, and the fact that he has actually matched Lando's career wins in less time?
Yeah. The Lando fans don't like me already. So
I
I'm just going to
I
speak my
I have
truth.
no friends. I'll speak my truth too.
I'm
I'm
just
right
going to
there
speak
with
my
you.
truth. What
Go
I
for it.
see, and there's some people who will remain nameless that are in the paddock. And I've mentioned this to somebody, one of them, about Oscar Piastri being like a silent assassin. And they agreed. Like, that to me is who Oscar Piastri is. He's not overly emotional. One of the things that makes Lando somebody cool that you would want to hang out with is he's an emotional dude. Like,
Mhm.
he has highs, he has lows. He's probably super fun to be around.
Yeah.
But that can be a double-edged sword when you're a driver, and
Mhm.
things are very much up and down. Piastri just seems to be so even keel. He's so level headed. I think the only time we saw him get a little flustered was in Jeddah, where Max was
Mhm.
gaining. Max was really fast at the end,
Yeah.
and Piastri was in some lap traffic and things. They seemed to, not lose his cool, but as much as Piastri could. So I think McLaren's going to have a big problem on their hands. They're going to be
Mhm.
great for the constructors. They're going to win it
Yeah.
hands down. But for the drivers, as long as Oscar Piastri, when we get to the midway through the season, if he's leading, I think he's got to be your man. You've got to just
Yeah.
back him
And
and say,
yeah.
this is who we are supporting here.
Yeah. And at what
What do you
point
think?
as a team does McLaren continue to papaya rules it and not take that stand, or do they realize that they have to prioritize, and it's not a this is our number one driver or not, because they have two number one drivers, right? They have
Yeah.
to make the decision of securing the maximum possible points and maximizing their place in the championships, and how that's going to factor into things, right? And
Yeah.
we'll probably never get to see that unless it spills out onto track in calls for strategy, but they're going to have to look internally, and their leadership is probably going to have to make some tough decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully they don't get complacent, because I think Oscar said something after the weekend. It was like, we can't get complacent with this, right? As he saw Max was able to put a gap in clean air and all of that, the team can't just be like, oh, really fast and
Yeah.
ride that out, right?
And whether we want to believe Helmut Marko or not, I think Red Bull is feeling pretty confident that the Imola package should bring them, closer to McLaren. But even in the driver standings now after Jeddah, Max is still in touching distance, and Max is Max, and it only takes one bad weekend
Yeah.
where somebody crashes or something happens in one of the two McLaren drivers that now all of a sudden, Max is slotted in between the McLaren drivers. And if you are taking points off of one another, that could very quickly become a Max is now in the lead of the
Yeah.
championship if the Imola package works. So yeah, you gotta start thinking about, maybe it is too early and you gotta let things play out. But I don't think papaya rules can go on after midway through the season.
No,
It's
I
gonna be
agree.
too close this year.
I fully agree with that.
Yeah.
Speaking of this year, I don't know if you have time. We had somebody in when you teased the episode, in your comments with kind of an interesting question about next year.
Mm-hmm.
Stefano Domenicali, I can't talk this afternoon apparently, gave an exclusive interview to Motorsport about
Yeah.
how he sees how there is some catch-up mechanisms and making sure that teams can catch up and fill performance gaps specifically around the new engine is really critical. And a lot of people seemed to not be a fan of that. I have some thoughts. I don't know if you have some thoughts as well, but I don't know what you were thinking based on that interview. I don't know if you read that or saw that at all.
Yeah, I saw it. It sparked my interest immediately because I
Yeah.
thought catch-up mechanisms. All right, if you've got a
Yes.
terminology for this, then this is legit something that you employ. Like this is part of what you're doing.
It's already in the regulations. There is a regulation in the 2026 power unit regulation. Sorry, keep going. I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's in the regulations.
No, yeah, but I'm thinking as well, even to this year, for instance, when they choose to issue TDs, whether or not they choose to issue TDs, this whole flexi wing debate. Barcelona, they're going to now, issue the TD for front wing flexibility. Is this a catch-up mechanism? Because most in the paddock feel like McLaren's front wing, Mercedes front wing flexibility is one of the key things that is enabling them to be so fast, right? And by employing now this catch-up mechanism, could it be you could potentially make it to where the end of the year is going to be a highly competitive one. Let's talk about, though, the 2026 catch-up mechanisms. What are some of the specific things that Domenicali mentioned in that article that could be something to help the rest of the grid catch up? Because the feeling generally is that Mercedes is ahead, right?
Yeah, he doesn't want another 2020 or 2014 Mercedes, essentially is what they're saying. So the theory is that Mercedes is ahead based on what everybody is kind of alluding to here. You can kind of read between the lines that Mercedes has kind of got their act together. And Domenicali goes on to say, essentially, there's nothing that's preventing us from working on and improving the package. And I think it's important to note, I believe by the time this episode is out, there will be another meeting to discuss the formulation of the regulation, specifically around the hybrid and the amount of energy versus the actual V10 or V8 of the engine. So I think it sounds like that's dead, at least currently, for this current package, but they're looking at the hybrid split now at this point. So that's what's coming by the time this episode's out. Go ahead. Sorry.
Did you read about how they're talking about the split?
Yes.
Okay. You're going to get to it.
They're talking. So I don't have the full deal. I've really only saw that they are talking about reducing it from 350 kilowatts, which is a 50% power split, to a 200 kilowatt split, which would take you to about 30 to 35% split. And it sounds like it's a bit of a mixed bag of who is going to support that as well. So I actually don't know if this is going to get put through, but essentially this would help in some of the more power sensitive tracks, it sounds like, in the reduction of that, because essentially with this higher power load, you're going to have to burn fuel to essentially meet the 9 joule requirement. It's really inefficient. It's really dumb, in my opinion, from a power flow and a power efficiency standpoint as you build your system. So I quite like this. From what we're hearing, it sounds like Red Bull supports it, Mercedes opposes it, Audi reportedly against
Ferrari supports it.
Yeah, Ferrari supports it.
Is what I read. And the split that I was referring to this is what I read. This will blow your mind.
All right,
if you haven't read it yet.
Educate me.
Apparently, what they're also discussing is whether or not the power distribution between electrical energy and internal combustion engine is different for qualifying than it is for the race. Meaning in qualifying, it's more of the 50-50 split in qualifying. But in the race, they flip back to more of like a 60-30 or 55, like it's 60-30, 60-40. You know what I'm saying? Like, because of the fact that, and it would be more engine, more ICE in the race to avoid the problems with the electrical energy deployment. And this is what I had read that they're actually looking at doing to try to find a middle ground, is not make it the same in qualifying and in the race, but have it be different in the race.
The problem is still there, though. That's why I'm
Yeah.
still up in arms. Just because you're doing it in the race versus in quali doesn't mean the problem still isn't there fundamentally.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm like wound up over this. I'm so pumped up over that. The problem will still exist because you're doing it on the same track regardless of what the split is. Just give us our party modes then and let us ride and say you have to meet this power threshold. If I'm the engineer, right? If I had to make this decision and I want to do that and say you have to use more electrical energy in qualifying than you have to do in the race, I'm just going to give you a target. I'm going to give you an energy target and tell you this is your curve. This is what you got to hit. I don't care how you do it. It has to be this split versus your engine split and go. That's just to say 50-50 like that. I don't like that at all.
Yeah.
I actually really don't.
It's an additional variable that I think
is.
I mean,
it could bring an interesting layer of how you do your qualifying and how you set up and push for qualifying versus prep versus cool. But it doesn't take away the fact that you would have had a problem had it been 50-50 during the race. It's still going to be there in qualifying, right?
Could it put teams ahead in qualifying that maybe have a better hybrid system, and then in the race means more passing because teams that I don't know.
But did you fix the passing problem? Because at that point it's moot. Did you fix your aero concerns, right?
You still
because if the aero is not fixed and we still have this wake problem, we still have this outwash problem, even though they're working on kind of trying to narrow that, it doesn't matter because you still have the same problem in passing and trying to induce passing, right? On track.
It's a big if.
That's got me wowed.
It's a big if, but I think, let's see how these discussions land, but it is very curious that we are in the 11th hour and these discussions are happening. This is something that Red Bull, Max Verstappen, Christian Horner brought up in 2023, I think, was it? Yeah. Or maybe early 2024 when they brought this exact point up. And then it was like, I mean, even Mercedes has admitted, though, right? I mean, they came out and they said that, you would have to expend fuel just to have enough electrical energy on a lap.
I think I said it. I think Blake said it. Hinsey. A lot of us said it as well in the tech community. And my whole thing, having been in an automotive launch environment, when this kind of stuff's happening, this 11th hour, yes, it's normal in a launch cycle, but to be fundamentally looking at ripping your platform up and making these big of upheavals in your platform, something's going on fundamentally that they don't like what they're seeing, or the teams aren't liking what they're seeing and are campaigning for it. And I was going to get back to the catch-up mechanism in the regulations too. We got a little squirrely off of there, and it's but it ties it. All of this ties into what Dominicali was saying in this interview, where he's like, we're not just going to not work on this package, essentially is what he said in this interview. And in power unit regulations for 26 section 4, there is a thing called additional development and upgrade opportunities. And I talked about this when we first got these. They're called, I believe, ADUOs is what they're abbreviated to. Essentially, so the first 5 races of this formulation, the FIA is going to monitor all of the ICE and power units for customers and manufacturers. And they're going to take an average power of that, of the output. And they explain how they're going to do that. And essentially, anybody whose ICE power is more than 3% below the highest ICE power recorded amongst all PU manufacturers automatically is getting an ADUO to help close the gap. And then the power unit manufacturers who get this ADUO may implement further upgrades as described in the regulations to extend their test benches and do everything that they can to close the gap. That's built into these regulations, essentially. And they'll have, it's been there the whole time, and I don't know why everybody's really shocked about it, but it's already been in there to help prevent kind of a 2014 Mercedes situation.
But is it cost cap limited? Did I miss that? I mean, because you still have the same cost cap.
No, because I believe, and maybe they changed it, but at the time, I remember when this first happened, they were going to be given additional development money as well.
Oh, okay. See, because for me, that's the only way that
Yeah.
That would make sense.
So I can look into it again, but I believe that there was also potentially additional cost available. Also, the new powertrain manufacturers, I think also this is to potentially protect like the Fords, the Audis, the General Motors. There's also already baked into this additional money automatically granted every season to those teams because they are new powertrain manufacturers to help make sure that they don't get 3%ed, essentially. Let's see, they can revoke the ADUO, they can take measures. I don't see anything about cost in here immediately. I'm in regulations right now, but I don't feel like regulations loopholing right now. I'll look, and I actually do think there was maybe something provisional that if you get the ADUO, it's understood, but I'm not sure directly. So we'll look into that. But I
that'd
think
be
there's
interesting
a lot
to confirm.
Yeah, I'll look into that, and I'll plug it in like a tweet under the show, or plug it in the show notes or something, or just come and be like, "Hi, this is Future Molly." I've looked at it, but I think with that, is there anything else you wanted to touch on? Otherwise, I think there's a lot to look forward to. I think to Miami, and with kind of what's going on as we build into the new regulation set.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots to look forward to.
Yes.
In the season, when our team's going to start deciding to start focusing a lot more on the 2026 car versus developments for 2025.
I think we're at the threshold, or we're getting close to the threshold. It was, I think, April or May when teams are allowed to have mule cars for 26 as well. So at what point
does that mean we're going to get spy shots?
Maybe, but I mean, there are rules about the mules that they can only be based on certain things, and what they can use. I think they can use this current chassis, but there's still some modifications of what only you're allowed to have on the mule. So I don't know if it's going to be like something crazy, but we should, I think in theory, there is some stuff we can see. It's in the new regulations. It's in this year's regulations that you can see the mule stuff, I believe.
Cool. Hopefully we get some Bigfoot level shots of Red Bull mule car.
Favorite. All right. So I think on that note, want me to wrap us up?
Yes, please.
Just vibes, a pure vibes wrap up. All right.
Yeah, pure vibes.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Breaking Bias. I know Obbs and I had a great time just kind of running the gambit here on how we felt following was it a double header? I don't even know anymore. But
so many races.
Don't forget to please like, rate, review, subscribe. Check us out on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and on socials as well, where we are BB Pod over on X. And if you like what Obbs and I do here on the pod, we are also over on X doing the same thing, just in written form. So please give us a follow and feel free to hang out over there as well. And thank you guys so much for listening again, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.